right, once you're ready, I'd love to get a call for motion. Call to vote.
Move to approve the minutes.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Adrian and Greg seconds.
I do think we, as edited, but I think we should do them 1 month at a time.
Yeah, I think so too. So October is what we want to start with, and then we'll go to November. Thanks, Greg. So that Adrian, okay to motion for the October minutes? Okay, and then Greg seconds. All let me call a vote then. All in favor for October minutes as edited? All opposed? Any abstentions? Damon noted. All right, thanks. So passed. November minutes.
Vivek, are we needing to do another motion? Okay.
Yeah, so we need another motion for the
Yeah,
November
I'm
minutes.
happy to motion
Okay.
to approve.
Megan, thank
the
you.
November minutes.
Second.
Great. And Adrian seconds. Okay, call to vote. All in favor? Your hands up. Virtual or actual. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so moved. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brian, for pulling that together. Appreciate your edits as well. Like to keep us on track and just spend a little moment here at the beginning. I wanted to take a couple of notes on, as we're wrapping up 2021, you know, for new commissioners, we used to this time of year meet at the Heathman Hotel and have breakfast and like chat, and it was so lovely to actually talk about things and be person to person. And we don't have that opportunity this year for a variety of reasons, including the pandemic. And so part of what I wanted to do is just check in with you about a few things. One, the center of which is planning for 2022. During those December meetings and also coming into the new year, we used to have what we referred to as retreats, little moments of time where we set aside usually a couple of hours. Some call it workshops or strategic planning sessions. I like calling it a retreat, where we kind of pull back from this conversation that usually is public, that has a lot of specific agenda items, and kind of setting that aside and kind of doing a little bit of reflection and kind of projecting about what we'd like to see in the coming year. And so in 2022, given all the momentum we have right now, I'm hearing things happening all around the country around urban forestry. There's the levy. We've heard Jen and the urban forestry team talking about resources coming into the division. I wanted to just kind of check with you all, more or less, just get a pulse of you all, whether it'd be worthwhile to think about maybe a early in the year timeframe where we could get together as commissioners and do a little bit of thinking about 2022 and where we'd like to kind of emphasize our interests, where we'd like to kind of get to alignment with urban forestry and help support, guide, advance the agenda. If you're not interested, that's fine. Totally get it. It is. I would propose it would probably end up being at least at least 2-hour chunk of time that we would set aside in January or February to really think about priorities, think about areas that we'd like to be devoting our time, any also process stuff. Love to get into that, priorities as well as process, what's working, what's not working, just to really get it on the table and kind of think through that as well as we can. So just want to open it up for a few minutes to see if that resonates with folks and seeing if that's yeah, any thoughts that come to mind. Yeah, Barbara. And go around. Let's go around the group. Start with Barbara and then Damon, and kind of go around in a not a circle, a rectangle of some kind. It looks like to me.
Or some other kind of shape.
Yeah.
So about 4 to 6 months ago or thereabouts, Brian introduced a topic of, we talked about the meetings, what was working, the times, you know, the length of the meetings, what we were getting done and not getting done. Did we have enough time to actually discuss anything and all of that? And I would like, and actually, I've been on the commission for almost 8 years, and I don't think we've ever done this in 2 hours. You know, I mean, we've had meetings where it's gone all day, where we've talked about priorities, we've talked about, you know, getting ourselves in alignment with Title 11. For instance, the Urban Forest Management Plan, you know, it says we're going to do that. We're way out of date. You know, do we want to figure out a way to get it done? What, you know, whatever the conversation might be. But we did have a discussion, and I'm assuming that, although I don't remember, that Brian took really good notes on that session, and that we have something that we've never really acted upon that we could use maybe to launch into this if people think it's a valuable idea to do it. Do you remember that, Brian?
Yeah, I remember that conversation being mostly about time of the meeting in person versus online or hybrid. I don't recall getting into prioritization of issues necessarily.
No,
but I can look back.
we didn't talk about prioritization of issues in that Zoom meeting, but we did talk about you know, are we having enough time to really talk about the things that we get presentations, but you know, we've maybe had some things that we wanted to get on the agenda that haven't gotten on the agenda because we've already had a full schedule. I'm kind of shooting in the dark because I don't have any notes, and I wasn't thinking about this when I saw the agenda, but I think there might be more there, but certainly not priorities or you know, things that we want to get done as a commission.
Okay. Thanks, Barbara. Bruce?
I think it's a good idea to have a whole meeting devoted to such thing. And at least when I sat in on one, I think before I was officially in, it was not a on the record meeting. It was held at PSU in a building. And so that I don't know if that was considered a public meeting. And I don't know if this would need to be a public meeting. That's one question I have, but I think it would be a very good idea to spend significant time talking about process and priorities.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. We'll go around. I see Megan next on my rectangle here, or polygon.
Let's talk shapes. I think it's a great idea. I love it. And I appreciate even some of Barbara's comments, right? Just about always knowing that we have a lot of priorities and the time to get to those. I also just want to bring in Greg's comment, because I think that it's kind of interesting in terms of time, the chat around the transition. So yeah, just that balance, but I'm very supportive. I think the timing is a thoughtful part of the question, and the format is kind of interesting based on what works for everyone.
Okay. And thanks, Megan. I have Anjanette next. What do you think about getting together to a little extended time to talk priorities and process? Okay, got a comment in here. Good. Thanks, Anjanette. Okay. Good, thank you, noted. I see Greg next, and then Damon. You're muted, Greg. There we
Okay,
go.
better?
Yep, better, way better.
You know, I don't know if you know, you're going to have 3 new commissioners, so I don't know if this would be like a combination of like exit interview for Barbara, Damon, and myself, or if you'd be better off waiting a couple months to people get their feet under them. I mean, just even reading Title 11. I mean, I remember the book I got when I started the commission, and it was probably 2 inches thick. So there's a lot of stuff that you read and you don't yet understand. So I think it's good. I think our meetings are often too packed. I think there are things that we've missed over the time. We don't cover as many things as we did when Mark tried to cram everything in. But I think you've expanded the time we've got on fewer topics. So I don't know that balance is. I know that I personally would be very curious to still see the research you've been doing, Vivek, on where we really are with the canopy. My big dream for getting work on Title 11 done in the urban forestry management plan is at least now on the table. So I think having a calendar,
Yeah.
when different instances and work are going to come up would help the new commission a lot.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Greg. That's a really important point. Damon, real quick.
Yeah. So I think that Greg's got a very valid point with us leaving, how that shapes the, whether the commission wants to have, us old farts talking and making plans for the new people. But then also one thought I was having is maybe if we, if there is this setting of intention and topics that want to have a deeper dive, perhaps, each month, one of those topics is assigned to a meeting so that at the very outset of the term, we start getting our priority topics in, and then the meetings get shaped around those rather than our priorities being left to the whims of whatever presentation we get.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Damon. Great. Daniel, and then Adrian. We need to keep moving this along. I don't want to cut
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we definitely need some time. And I'm thinking in particular, talking about how we want to fulfill our roles as commissioners. I think everybody kind of feels like there are just so many tree related issues that we end up just reacting to presentations and really not having time to talk about some issues and even how we want to respond, because there's definitely, I think, some opportunities to come together and advocate more in the traditional sense of the word in other forums, whether it be to the director of parks or to the entire city council or whatever, and even trying to work on getting more input from the larger community, which it's hard to do. And I recognize we're all volunteers and, everyone's juggling day jobs and some folks have small children to deal with as well. And so everybody has a limited amount of time. So
Yeah.
I think talking about how best to spend the limited time we have would be a really good conversation.
Yeah.
And it also seems like just on that larger outside world that for us, everything with the urban forest seems to be converging on climate change and equity, environmental justice, and how those two intersect with each other. And, I feel we could really be a great voice in helping bring change with the city government. So
Great. Thanks,
I
Daniel.
want to throw that out.
Great. Appreciate that. I agree. Adrian, you want to bring us home?
Sure, yeah, no, I'd be totally supportive of doing a planning intensive session. I think it would be optimal to do it in person, even if we're in an outdoor heated space. If we could work it out with it, again, we're unclear whether this has to be an invitation to the public and whether that would be feasible, but even doing it as sort of a preliminary brainstorming meeting and bringing it back to a formal meeting, I think would be very helpful. I would tend to advocate for including the folks who are rotating out because, this turnover all the time. And I think we need to utilize their experience and, to keep the process going. So,
Yeah. Institutional memory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Brian and
Thanks.
Barbara, we need to hold off. We're cutting into Jen's time, so I really want to jump to Jen. Brian, you have a quick comment?
I just want to make sure everyone saw Anjanette had a comment in the chat. I just want to make sure everyone saw that as part of the conversation.
Thanks for pointing that out.
And then, yes, if we were to meet outside of our regular monthly meeting for some sort of planning session, it would be, if we have a quorum, it does constitute a public meeting. So that would just mean that we would have to just make the public aware that it's happening, and if they wanted to attend to observe, they could.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks all. Sounds really promising. I really noted many of these concerns and comments that you came up. I'd love to get back to you on that, and stay tuned. Stay tuned. I want to keep following up on this and seeing if we can get some momentum here for maybe figuring something out that works for everybody early next year. Jen, can I turn it over to you for Forestry's report?
You bet. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you.
Morning.
Let's see. Today I have 7 items. Some are really concise. So here we go. First of those is that last weekend, I'm sure you all noticed, we had some high winds. So that gives me the opportunity to remind you of one of the responsibilities that Parks Urban Forestry has, and that's providing 24/7 tree emergency service for public streets and city properties in Portland. And our team last weekend received about 40 calls for service in literally a few hours time. So remember, the wind came in a hurry and then was gone. Interesting. I want to recognize that the urban forestry arborists, particularly last weekend, John Watkins and Rick Bunch, who led the emergency response throughout that weekend, for their efforts. And of course, our operations manager, Larry McGinnis, who leads and manages the city's tree emergency response system, as well as other tree maintenance related work. So second item, yes, as Daniel mentioned earlier, you all received feedback from the Bureau of Transportation on the comments that you all submitted on the draft pedestrian design guide update, and that project PBOT has been working on for a little over a year now. I think that the responses that you all got are hopeful. It is one step in the project, and the project continues, and there's more to come. Urban Forestry and the other infrastructure bureaus in the city have also submitted comments. And in addition, Urban Forestry and PBOT continue to work closely together on the guide content, kind of on a rolling, ongoing basis. In February, Bureau of Transportation plans to issue the updated guide. That is not far away. And as Daniel told you this morning, it's actually been extended a little bit, their timeline, because of staffing needs. So if the commission desires to discuss further or comment further to the Bureau of Transportation on that, January would be the opportunity, that meeting in January. I also want to thank Daniel for making time to articulate the commission's comments to PBOT and doing that really productively and effectively, I think. So thank you.
That was a group effort, Jen. We had like 8 different people on the policy committee, all contributing. So
absolutely, and I appreciate you recognizing them. But somebody has to hold the pen or their finger over the keyboard in the end and make it all come together in a way that really works with the recipients, right? That's a bit of an art. So I just want to recognize you for that in particular. My third item is an update on the current tree code amendment project. So as you all will recall, the current project is for minor and technical amendments to Title 11, the city's tree code. And right now, the project is completing the stage of informing the other infrastructure and city planning bureaus of proposed changes and identifying and addressing any concerns that they may have. And those bureaus are Water Bureau, Environmental Services, Transportation, Development Services, and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Urban Forestry, we chose to engage all those bureaus early and directly in the project And the other bureaus have expressed appreciation for this approach. And I share that because we did that intentionally, thinking that's the right way for the city to work together. And we're hoping this serves as a model and a standard and encourages other bureaus in our form of government as it is currently to work together and support each other's roles and responsibilities, help the city function and communicate consistently and speak with one voice. We anticipate bringing the proposed amendments to council in spring, as has been planned. And a fourth item, Streets 2035, the update on that. Again, that's the more or less master planning project for design of public streets in the city of Portland. That continues. It includes, at this point, a focal point includes addressing the issue of the Water Bureau's requirement that they enacted about 4 years ago, prohibiting tree planting within 10 feet of a larger 24-inch or greater water transmission pipe that's under a complete street. And that's a street with pavement and curbs and sidewalks, all the bells and street whistles, so to speak. So Parks has provided extensive comment and technical information refuting that policy over the intervening years since it was introduced. And recently, Water Bureau released a draft administrative rule that includes the requirement and does not reflect any of Parks' input. So Parks again has submitted evidence, objections, technical information, concerns, and the Bureau of Transportation Streets 2035 project plans to reconvene Urban Forestry and the Water Bureau on this issue. Also, the Water and Parks Bureau directors are engaged in that topic. So that story continues. Fifth item, as I think Daniel or someone mentioned in your previous discussion, we do indeed have levy that we're implementing and are very grateful for, and that's expanding the city's forest management capacity. Right now, I wanted to make you aware of some positions that we have open for hires. So in the hopes that you can spread the word and get really great applicant pools for these positions. Closing on Monday, the 20th, we're hiring 3 urban forestry specialists. Their classification is called botanic specialist. They will be working in 3 different areas. So same classification, but different roles in city forest management. One of those is a stewardship position that'll do outreach to communities and organizations around trees, especially focusing on working with BIPOC communities and youth. Another one is an outreach type position, conducting outreach to community organizations, schools, residents, promoting tree planting opportunities, and focusing again on BIPOC communities, low income neighborhoods, and East Portland. And then the third of the 3 is a planting focused position. This position will help provide customer service with property owners who are getting trees and otherwise implement the few planting programs that we have in the works. In addition to those 3 positions, also closing on Monday, meaning applications need to get in by the end of the day Monday, in case that was city speak, sorry. Our tree technician positions. The tree techs, to remind you, are the city's first line of tree services. Those are the folks who work as a team to answer 823 tree, trees at portlandoregon.gov, and also manage our website, as well as do many other things involved in our permitting and regulation process and dispatching for emergencies. So I'm going to put in the chat a link to our career page for Parks and ask you to share that on with everyone and anyone that might be interested. Even if they're not interested, remember that there will be many other positions coming up for urban forestry as well as parks, a wide array of different roles. And folks who go to that website can sign up to receive notices on a regular basis so they can keep on top of the opportunities. Last thing is for Brian to give you an update on the residential infill project 2. So Brian, take it away.
Yeah, so quick update on where that project is headed. So as you'll recall, when BPS staff came to brief the UFC on it, the really main issue that that we had raised and that you had raised as well is this concern about Title 11 tree preservation standards which are do not apply to lots under 5,000 square feet. And so if you remember, RIP 2 is really focused on large lots. There are R10 and R20, very, very large lots. And state law now requires that the city allow those lots to be subdivided into smaller lots. And that can be like a triplex, a fourplex, cottage clusters is a new sort of built form that's being allowed, which causes it raises some interesting questions, because it's almost like, you know, how do you divide a cottage cluster into individual lots? And so basically what BPS has proposed, and this is really consistent with what Urban Forestry was wanting to see, is that all of the development review will treat the site as a whole. So even though it will, at the end of the development, it will be subdivided into individual ownership parcels, all of the city's requirements will treat the original large site. So that means that Title 11 tree preservation and planting will apply, because it'll be a lot larger than 5,000 square feet, and the code will be clear that future development activity will still revert to the original site before it was subdivided. So this is really good news. It's exactly what we're hoping for. All the other bureaus want to see that as well, because they have similar complications for their development standards and reviews if it were to be all these smaller sites. So that's the direction it's going. No amendment to Title 11 is necessary in order to implement that, but we are planning to make a very small change to the language of Title 11, just to really, if a developer is reading the development part of the code, just to make it very clear that when they are dealing with those kinds of lots, they need to be treating the site as a whole, not the individual one. So that's sort of a clarifying amendment that we'll put into the code just for ease of use, but the actual policy part of it will be handled by the RIP 2 work. And that is, there's a state requirement that be implemented, I think by June. So that project is moving pretty quickly. Barbara.
Hey, very tight. Quick question, Barbara.
Yeah. Is my mic looks on. How is the recruitment for the Urban Forestry Commission going? Are applications already in and you're going through them? Are they still due? Just curious on the status.
Yeah, we've received 16 applications so far. So yeah, good response in terms of numbers. I know we are continuing to do outreach with the community engagement and communications folks at Parks. And I know Jen has been doing some outreach as well. So the posted recruitment closes on the 19th. And so we're going to be looking at some of the applications, getting a sense of is it a strong enough applicant pool to really proceed with appointing some of the applicants, and if not, we might open up the recruitment again. But in general, in terms of the numbers, pretty strong. I think it's the most we've had in quite a few years. So,
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Want to transition is if there's a possibility of putting your question in the chat, I would encourage you to do that, and maybe we could kind of continue with responses through the chat if that's available to you. If not, then please, yes, raise your hand and I will try to get to you. I wanted to move into the timing wise. We're right on. We're a little bit delayed, and so Bruce, if you can get your question into chat, that would be wonderful. I just want to make sure we have time for folks who are here. I'm gonna roll right into Jen again here, or unless we have Rick and Julie and Casey on deck for discussing the fee waiver policy, which is on our agenda right now as well. And so what I'd like to do is, Jen, are you going to introduce them and then turn it over? Okay, so we'll roll right into Jen then, and if there's a way to get your questions, put them in the chat, please.
Great, thank you, Vivek. Yes, so today we have with us from the Urban Forestry team, Casey Jogerst, who is the manager for permitting and regulation, Rick Faber, who is a permitting and regulation coordinator, and also Julie Fukuda, who is the supervisor and leader of the tree technician team. And they're going to be talking today about work we've been doing for a couple years now around providing opportunities to reduce or waive fees, required regulatory fees in certain instances. So with that, I will let, I believe, Casey take it away.
Yes, thank you. And Brian, do you have the presentation?
I can share it. Yeah, let me pull it up.
Okay, thank you. Well, while Brian's pulling that up, I just want to say thank you. It's really nice to have the time on your agenda. We appreciate it. I tend to see you all in the face of appeals. So it's really nice to see you all and come and share some really important and exciting work that we've been doing in the permitting and regulation team. So Jen already kind of did introductions, but I'll just kind of walk through a little bit of how we'll do the presentation. I'm just going to give a brief introduction and a little bit of background. And then I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues, Rick Faber, who's going to talk more about sort of the meat of the program and the bones of it. And Julie will talk a little bit more about the implementation thereof of the program. And I do want to give a special shout out and thanks to both Rick and Julie, as well as a former temporary employee named Ali, who did a lot of the work to get these two pilot programs up and running to be at this point. They were really pivotal in making it happen. So thank you. Any luck, Brian?
Yes, pulling it up now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm here today to talk to you about financial assistance by waivers. And just a little bit of background here is that when Title 11 was launched in 2015, there's various components or areas within the tree code that speak to waivers. But as you all likely are aware, there were components of the tree code that weren't implemented immediately back in 2015, and that we've been sort of making our way over time when we have funding and the staffing resources to implement some of those aspects that weren't implemented immediately. You can go to the next slide, Brian. So when we started thinking about this, we wanted to make sure to have really clear that goals in terms of what these programs were going to be. And so we were thinking that it was regulatory consistency and equitable access. And what I mean by regulatory consistency is sort of building on existing city programs and making sure that we did our research to see what already exists out there. There's many other divisions and views that have regulatory requirements. And we didn't want to necessarily have to completely reinvent the wheel, as well as just make it more accessible for residents. The more that we have similar programs from one another as we move from bureau to bureau, the easier it is for folks to kind of understand what the program is. And then equitable access kind of ties into the second bullet point I have here. It's that in permitting and regulation, we utilize permits and, when necessary, enforcement in order to facilitate the requirements that property owners have to maintain their own trees. And so equitable access to our services essentially is through those permitting documents in order to do that work. But that leads us into sort of that second bullet point where those permits do have a cost associated with them. And so one of the primary goals of this program was to make sure that we can reduce those financial barriers so that there's voluntary compliance, and specifically in terms of low-income residents. We have data in regards to where our permits are issued, as well as where we see more enforcement or less enforcement. And unfortunately, there is a tie in terms of those areas that have low income, low canopy and less compliance. So it was really important to us that we really figured out how to reduce those financial barriers so that people would be open and feel okay, essentially coming to us to gain those permits and not trying to sort of avoid what the requirements are. And when we're talking about those financial barriers, it's both in regards to application fees, as well as when people find themselves in enforcement situations. Enforcement situations can become very costly, and especially if they sit for a long time, they can accrue pretty significant fees. And we can move to the next slide, Brian. Thank you. So here are just some considerations that we were looking at when we were building the program. And all of them really tied into determining that, one, it was going to be a pilot, and that's kind of related to cost recovery in terms of, if we're waiving fees, where is that money coming from? And so it's important that we, run a pilot and perform an evaluation to really understand, did it work? Did it meet the goals that we intended it to? Is it functioning the way that we had intended as well? As I mentioned already, compliance, our hope is that we will gain more voluntary compliance from Portlanders by having financial waivers accessible. I mentioned already equity and inclusion, making sure that we can make our services equitable and have access for everybody. And then COVID-19 was definitely an impact financially for many people, and that was one of the sort of drivers to give us a big push to get this further off the ground than where we had it prior. And then the Ombudsman Office, that is a resource for anybody to ask questions or complaints in regards to what may be happening to them from various divisions within the city. So I had many conversations with the Ombudsman's Office over the years in terms of folks who were finding themselves in financial situations and were looking to us for what kind of waivers we were offering. And what the Ombudsman Office does is typically look straight to the code of the bureau or division that they're working with. And he did see that, our code does have mention of it. So I had kind of been keeping him in tune with what we were doing as we were building it, just letting him know we weren't quite there yet, but we were working on it. So these are all just various considerations to get us to the point of putting the pilots out and implementing them. And with that, I will turn it over to Rick, who's going to talk more about the bones of the program.
Thank you. So my understanding is that everybody in the UFC has received the document, the Urban Forestry Title 11 waiver guidelines. It has a big interim blazed across every page. It's broken up into two major categories with some subcategories. We're going to talk a little bit about the application fee waivers, which are specific to somebody submitting an application, whether it's a tree removal application, a tree pruning application, or appeal application, or administrative review application. We have financial waivers for those. And then on the deeper into the code, we have the enforcement waivers, where we're talking about somebody has been found in violation of the code. And we have a series of waivers for financial reasons. And then we have lien reductions, which we'll go into more detail about exactly what those are. But when people are not compliant for lengthy periods of time, they can accrue liens that we are providing certain ways to get reductions on. Next slide, please. As Casey mentioned, code does mention waivers in numerous places throughout. What we're talking about today specifically touch on application fees, as well as the enforcement waivers subcategory specifically touches upon urban forestry and the city of Forester providing a way to get waivers. Next slide, please. These guidelines that you've seen or you will be hearing about today have not been created in a vacuum. In an effort to be one city as much as possible, I reviewed as many resources out there as I could, and what you see here are the administrative rules and the other programs that we leaned heavily upon. Both BDS and ONI have some administrative rules specific to lien reductions. So when liens are accrued, they have ways to reduce those and criteria that we modeled off of. BDS also has administrative rules to discuss how their fees can be waived. BDS, being Bureau of Development Services, has many fees of many different kinds that can be very expensive. So they have a very robust system to review and analyze those for potential waivers. A lot of these financial waivers that we provide rely on the median family income. And we found that the Portland Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services already provides an assistance program called the Sewer, Stormwater, and Water Financial Assistance Bill Assist Program, where they already have a method of calculating the percentage of income and having a series of criteria. Again, modeling that one city, using that one city concept, we decided to use that program for our own qualifications. Next slide, please. This is straight from the first page of their application. You can see that they have some income eligibility requirements based on the number of people living in a household. They also have some based on, single family home. They must live at the property. And so we do is we lean on this, in that if somebody is receiving the bill assistance through this program, they are going to qualify for our financial assistance programs as well. We didn't want to make up a new system with different criteria, which would just lead to endless confusion. This is also synergistic in that people will learn about this program as they talk to us looking for financial assistance. And this meets the Water Bureau and BES's goals of outreach and getting more people into the program, finding the people that need assistance so that it can be provided to them. So we're working closely together on that. Next slide, please. So to go into the three different types of waivers that we're talking about today, the first one are these application fee waivers. Again, we're focused on the fees that are used to help fund the program. So we're talking about the tree permit application fee, the tree permit appeal application fees, administrative review application fees. The tree permits can also be root pruning permits, removal permits, or pruning permits. All of those get rolled up into that tree permit application. And the eligibility is that they're meeting those discounts from the Water Bureau. Specifically, we want to see them get those discounts from the Water Bureau, and then they will be eligible for these fee waivers. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to turn this over to Julie, because it's really Julie and the techs that take these in and review them.
Hi, everyone. Julie Fukuda. I'm the supervisor for the tree tech team. As you know, we are the single point of contact for urban forestry and all things trees. When you call 823-TREE, my staff will respond, or when you email trees@portlandoregon.gov. So it's our role as the folks who do the intake to process these applications. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when the applicant connects with us through the application process. So my team will receive the permit applications when they come in, and when there is a request for a fee waiver associated with that application, my staff will reach back out to the applicant and obtain that proof of eligibility. And you see here on the bottom half of the slide, that's an example of what we're looking for. So as Rick mentioned, the water bill assistance is shown as a discount on the water bill. And so all that an applicant needs to do is send us a copy of the bill, and then we would use that to verify their eligibility for our financial assistance. Some folks who request the financial assistance, they're not yet enrolled in the Portland Water Bureau program. And so we would connect them and guide them to how to apply for that. And so sometimes the proof of eligibility that we're getting is just a statement from the Water Bureau customer service team saying that they have met the criteria and they are now enrolled. So the water bill, if they're already enrolled, is one one way that they can let us know, or through communication directly with our partners in the Water Bureau. I will say it sounds complicated to have to navigate processes within 2 different bureaus, but really it's the Water Bureau has been really wonderful, very responsive, very quick. And most of our customers have said this is a very easy and quick process for them. Okay, let me hand it back to Rick.
Okay, so those are the application fee waivers. So that's when somebody is coming to us with an application in hand that has an associated fee. We're going to change tracks dramatically, and we're going to go talk about the enforcement chapter of the code. So enforcement, of course, is when somebody is found in violation of the code. They don't get a permit, they remove a tree when they're not supposed to, they prune a tree without getting the appropriate permit. They don't plant a tree when they're supposed to. They don't follow the conditions of the permits that they have gotten. That can put them into a violation of the code, and they will be receiving a notice from Urban Forestry should we hear about it. And that's where we are now. So anytime somebody receives a notice from under Chapter 1170, the enforcement chapter, the eligibility is very similar in that we're talking about owners, primary residence, and receiving Tier 1 discounts, but we also are considering that they're going to meet any unwaived enforcement actions. We're also going to be considering that have they had lots of violations in the past, specifically in the last 3 years. We don't want to be providing enforcement waivers for serial offenders. We don't have a lot of serial offenders, but we wanted to make sure that that was accounted for in our guidelines. The next slide, please. And so the way this works is that as the coordinator, I'm also the enforcement specialist, I suppose you could call me, is that somebody gets a notice. The notice has information as to how to apply for a waiver, and it points them to an application that's available online. If they call us, they can also get this application. And you'll see that there's a checkbox for financial enforcement waiver that will come in, and it'll come to me. They will provide proof of the Tier 1 discounts, and then it's a bit of a conversation as to what it means to waive the corrections. So when someone is found in violation of the code, the corrections could be to do what would have been necessary to get the permit, or the corrections could be above and beyond. For example, if somebody removes a tree that was going to be denied for removal, the violation could have additional trees required to be planted because the tree wasn't going to be approved in the first place. But at no point in time will we reduce the violation corrections to below what would have been required. So if they removed a tree and they would have been required to plant 1 tree had they gotten the permit, that's still going to be the requirement. If they would have been required to plant 3 trees, that's going to be the requirement. The waivers for anything that would be above and beyond what the permit would have required. So I am going to work closely with the tree inspector to determine on a case-by-case basis what that scenario is. And then we will reissue the correction notice, the violation and correction notice for the new corrections once the waiver has been applied. Next slide, please. Now, again, switching a little bit, we're still in that enforcement realm, but we're at a situation where somebody has not made their corrections in the provided timeline. When somebody has not made their corrections in the timeline given, they can begin accruing what's called enforcement penalties, monthly enforcement penalties. And these, you can think of them as a late fee. According to the fee schedule, they're $250 per month. So if somebody doesn't meet their corrections, it comes to me as being non-compliant. I set up a lien on their property. They get $250 through the revenue division. They still don't come into compliance the next month. They get another $250 and another $250, and so on and so forth until they come into compliance with their corrections. Now, these can obviously add up quite rapidly for even minor violations. If somebody was required to plant 1 tree they can still get thousands of dollars worth of liens on their property should they not come into compliance. The eligibility here is for all properties, where any time a property is receiving these, they are going to be able to look through the lien reduction criteria and potentially get some reduction. Next slide, please. Again, as the enforcement specialist, I am the one that's reviewing these. Now, anytime somebody comes into compliance in these cases, it comes to me to close out the lien. And in that, I'm reviewing the case. So these lien reductions can be assessed in two ways. Either one, the case is closed and the lien is set to open, means it's not accruing any further and needs to be paid, and the property owner submits an application with information triggering a review. Or as I'm reviewing the case, as I'm closing it down, setting it to open to prevent the continual accrual, I find out that some of the criteria are met. In either of those two cases, there's two different types that we're going to touch on in the next slide, either a maximum lien or the qualifying for the reduction criteria. I will see if those apply, and then I will be modifying the lien by sending notice to the revenue division. Next slide, please. So the enforcement fee maximum, again, this is in accordance and alignment with both BDS and ONI in what their processes are. I don't make these things up in a vacuum, but we have these enforcement fee maximums. For 1 and 2 family residential, 30 months of fees is going to be a maximum amount. So imagine somebody violates the code, they don't come into compliance for multiple years. 3 years down the road, they finally get in touch with us, they finally make their corrections. They're not going to have more than 30 months of fees. We're going to take it back down to 30. So 30 times 250, that's going to be the maximum amount that we're going to have as an enforcement fee. For everybody else, is going to be 60 months. Same thing. You've got a commercial property, long time not in compliance. They come into compliance. They're not going to be imposed more than 60 months of those $250 fees. Now, the lien reduction criteria, you notice that there's a lot of up to 100% reductions. Most of the lien reduction criteria are providing guidance for when a couple months should be knocked off or perhaps waived completely, such as financial or physical hardship. So again, we have those fee waivers. We could also take into consideration somebody was in the hospital for 2 months and that's why they were late. Well, they show us some documentation of that and we're going to be able to waive that. If they have multiple cases with the same violation, that would hopefully be caught up front. But if we have, multiple liens running for the same property for the same violation, well, that's certainly something amiss, and we're going to provide reduction for that. A lapse in contact isn't really an issue because the revenue division sends out a notice every single month, but it could happen. Something could go amiss. There could be an address change and it doesn't get caught. Or an error notification. We posted the wrong property and there was a mix-up somehow. We want to be able to provide reductions for when errors take place. Same thing with the delay in process. What typically happens here is they contact us on a Monday. We go out to inspect it on a Friday to close out the case, and we find out that they were accrued another fee on a Wednesday. So there's a little bit, some room for error in there to go back and fix those kinds of situations. However, if there's a hearing officer penalty, that's not our penalty. So we have no way to provide a reduction for those. And then the most interesting one here, I think, is the minor violation, where we have up to 75% reduction when it's a minor violation. And if you read through the guidelines, you'll see that we have some criteria spelled out as far as the number of trees that are required to be replanted or whether or not a tree was removed if it's just a pruning violation. The intent here is to recognize that $250 is a lot of money when it's accruing for multiple months. And if the violation wasn't that bad, we have a way to provide some relief in the form of these reductions once the corrections have been made. So I want to reiterate that all of these lien reductions are only available once the corrections have been made. Until those corrections are made, they're going to continue to accrue these with the associated costs and charges and penalties of the auditor's office, which are not waived at the end of the day. So this is simply a way to make those late fees more palatable and more affordable for the residents at large. Next slide, please. We'll toss this back to Julie to talk about some outreach and information.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about how do applicants find out about the availability of financial assistance with us. So as shown below on the bottom part of the slide, that's a snippet from our permit application form. And so the link to the online article is there for people to find details. And I'll just read, it says property owners living on low incomes may qualify for a fee waiver. For more information, visit, and then it has our link. So people can find out about it that way, and they often do. If they miss that little bit of text on our permit application form, they may come to it through our website independently or through Google search. Then the last way is oftentimes my staff will receive an inquiry or phone call, or somebody's inquiring in general about the application process or what is involved in a tree permit, and they might make a statement about the burden of the application fee, at which time my team would take the opportunity to offer information about the financial assistance program. Let's see. Again, one additional way in which they can find out about the program is if they miss it on the application form, if they're submitting the application through the online portal, there's a little checkbox that they can check as part of the steps of submitting the application. And so it will give an opportunity to check the box fee waiver requested. What are some of the stories that we're hearing from folks as they receive financial assistance through this pilot program? We've heard some great feedback from people saying that they didn't realize that there was a program through the Water Bureau. And so once they enroll there, they become a recipient of financial assistance in both bureaus at the same time. And that's been some really positive feedback from folks. Another thing we've heard is that it's very easy and quick to get the Water Bureau approval, so that moves them through that process in order to complete their permit application with us. Something that we're still working through is that tree contractors sometimes submit permit applications on behalf of property owners. And so at least in one instance, there was a situation where a property owner would have qualified for the fee waiver if they had made the request, but their contractors submitted on their behalf and for whatever reason didn't know about our program or didn't take the opportunity to check in with their client. So clearly there's some more outreach we can do so that tree care providers are informed about this program so that they can help their clients as well. Okay, I'll hand it back to Rick here for the last slide before questions.
Yes, and so as mentioned earlier by Casey, this is a pilot program right now. So we're doing a lot of data collection in the process, and we're documenting all of these cases in a way that they can be queried for in the future, and we will have reports so that we can pull all the data determining how many cases were applied for, how many waivers were provided, what the cost of those waivers were. And another thing that we're doing is we're going to be doing customer survey evaluations where we're reaching out to get that feedback from people as far as, did they know about the program? Did it help them? How did they apply? How did they find out about it, etc. So right now, anticipated pilot end date is August 2022. We do have some provisions for extending the pilots if we don't have a lot of cases. You'll imagine that we do get regular cases for the financial application or the application fee waivers, but there's not a lot on the enforcement waivers, and simply due to volume. We get a lot of applications. We don't have a lot of code compliance cases in comparison, so the likelihood of somebody being eligible and qualifying for it is much lower. So we want to make sure that we at least have examples that we can look at and evaluate. And then after the program is done, then we're going to put together all the data and put together a report. I'll likely be back here in about a year or so to talk about it with you. And we really want to evaluate not only the cost of it, but the effectiveness of it. Are people finding out about it, and are they taking advantage of it? So much more to come, and hopefully we'll be able to, use that information to improve and bolster the program in the future. Next slide is just a big question mark. So I imagine that we might want to go back to some slides to do questions. I'm not sure exactly how you want to handle questions, Vivek.
We generally like to go around, round robin with questions, just so everyone has a chance, and you can pass if you don't have a question. So if folks are okay with that, and you can of course use the chat to put questions in. This is one of the advantages, I guess, of being online virtual, is that we have this kind of two avenues of questions, verbal and on digital. Go around circle. Should we go in the same order, Barbara, or reverse order? We can maybe, no, let's just keep it simple. Let's go Barbara, and then Bruce, and then I forget, it was like Megan, and same polygon that I had before. Do you want to start us off, Barbara? Any questions? You can pass as well.
Yeah, I'm going to pass. I just want to say, Rick, Julie, and Casey, nice job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Bruce?
I appreciate all the work that has gone into this. I think it's a waste of Urban Forestry Commission time to spend 45 minutes on this when we have many different policy issues to deal with. This is more of a public relations opportunity for urban forestry, and maybe that's what Urban Forestry Commission is for. Thank you.
Jen, did you want to respond to that? Your hand went up.
Yeah, I do, Bruce. One of the roles that we rely on the commission for is to advise us on policy things. And that's why we wanted to bring this to the commission. We are looking for your advice. We've constructed this carefully as a pilot program in response to our desire to really help people, especially folks who are lower income, be able to have and maintain trees and stay in their homes and those sorts of things, in response to a lot of complaints that we hear from folks about tree affordability and regulations. So I appreciate your perspective, but I wanted you to understand that it's important to us to get the commission's feedback on these things. That's your function.
All right. Let's keep going, Megan.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually really appreciate this because I have had some concern about our increase in fees in particular. I did have a couple of questions. Some of it might just be what I don't myself understand. One was just a question. I think kind of the intersection with kind of the other program is fascinating, right? Because hopefully ultimately it means people are actually benefiting more in the long run. But I am curious if folks ever are explicitly not interested in like applying in that program and just really are like, no, I just want a reduction in this one particular situation. So that's one question I have. But my other question related to compliance around enforcement is getting a bit of a better idea of when like a potential lien does kick in, because I know that we've had lots of conversations about the lack of compliance capabilities and our like concerns around the fact that like compliance wasn't happening. So I'm trying to get an idea, is this largely case by case when it's brought to the attention? So just understanding when those lien situations actually are occurring, because it seems like it actually may not be occurring in a lot of situations.
Thank you. So I'll address the lien question first, and then I'll pass it off to Julie about the what they're hearing from the public. So the liens we're talking about are specifically to code compliance cases, and code compliance cases are specifically brought up when there's a concern brought to our attention. So a member of the public submits a concern, we open an investigation, we go out there, we verify that a violation has occurred, they get a notice, time passes, they don't come into compliance, a tree inspector goes out and verifies that compliance has not been met. Then it comes to me and, you know, I do another review and I set up the case as a lien with the revenue division. So these are not situations where we issue a tree removal permit and we go back and follow up on that. Now, if the neighbor says a tree removal permit was issued and they didn't plant and we receive a call about it, that could end up going down that pathway. But it's specific to code compliance cases that are being brought to us from the public. And Casey had her hand up about that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add really quick, because I think it's important that this doesn't apply to dangerous situations. We have a different avenue to make sure that those get taken care of in a timely manner. So we don't just lien the property and wait for them to take care of it. So I just wanted to clarify that.
That's a great thing. And I did not properly address that in the PowerPoint. So that's a really good additional context to this. If the violation is a dangerous tree where we think the tree is going to fall down or branches are going to fall down and the property owner does not come into compliance, that goes to the Bureau of Development Services nuisance abatement program, and they will send out a crew to abate the lien. Those liens are not what we're talking about. So if they abate the nuisance, they put a lien on the property for the cost of abatement. That's not what we're talking about here, because those are costs that have been incurred by the city and need to be replaced. Jen? And you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Struggling somehow to click that button. I wanted to share, Ann Jeanette has a question in the chat. And I think we might have missed it. I mostly have heard complaints from elders in my community about liens. Is this process easily accessible to folks that are not online in general?
And my sense from what I'm hearing, it is. So every time there's a monthly lien that gets assessed, a letter gets sent to the physical property. And that letter has phone numbers and to the revenue division. The revenue division will be able to talk to people to figure out where that lien comes from. If it's coming from an urban forestry case, the revenue division is ready to have that conversation and to give them our information as well. So I've had a handful of these reviews that have started by people picking up the phone and having conversations with primarily the revenue division, because that's where they're getting the notice from. So I believe that we're making this accessible. I believe that the word is able to get out there from what I'm seeing outside just the internet. And then Julie, if you want to jump on Megan's other question about people not wanting to enroll with the Water Bureau, I believe.
Yeah, Megan, am I understanding that you're asking about people who are complaining about our fees but don't want to enroll?
I was more asking if that comes up, right? Like if there's I mean, it seems like it's beneficial, but maybe someone does not want to have to officially enroll in a program, et cetera.
Yeah, I will say, you know, this is just anecdotal from what I know. We often have complaints about our application fees, period, whether or not people are, you know, on low income or not. So we do our best to help the people who think they might qualify or who believe they might qualify. And the enrollment process is simple, and we provide a lot of guidance and answer, question and answer, and, you know, as much information or prompting that people need, we will provide. As for the people who, you know, they're complaining about the fee, we're pretty good at getting an idea about whether or not they're just complaining about the fee and that they really are not anywhere close to being able to qualify for the eligibility. And so, right now I don't have a good answer for that. We take that feedback from the public. Casey, maybe, I don't know if you have anything more you want to say on that.
I would just add that what I've heard from the tree tech team, because they're the ones that are typically communicating with folks, is that those callers are happy that there's this other program that now they're going to get an additional discount. So I haven't heard it in a negative way or concerned about enrolling in it. What I've heard is that they're like, oh, I didn't even know that existed and that I could qualify for it. And it's been a positive association.
Awesome. Thanks, Shawl. And this is super short because I know there's lots of others. Rick, how long does it take before compliance would kick in? Like, what is the amount of time that people actually have to comply before they could, in fact, accrue what may be considered quite hefty fees? Like, I'm trying to understand that, and then I'll stop.
Yeah, so there's a number of different timelines. Some are as short as 30 days. Some can be as long as 180 days. So it really is a case-by-case scenario. If it's simply you did a thing and you have to turn in some paperwork, that's going to be 30 days. And then the tree inspector is going to, re-inspect, and they're going to send it to me. So it takes at least another 30 days before it even gets on the list for enforcement. And then there's another, 15 days while it gets the paperwork submitted and all that. So even after that 30 days, there's another 45 to 60 days of paperwork behind the scenes. So that's on the short end. On the long end, if somebody has to plant a tree, we just recently updated the timeline to be a full 180 days so that they have more of a chance of planting within a planting season. So it could be 180 days before it gets sent to me as non-compliant, and then I go through that again, 45 to 60 days to get it processed and the lien started.
Thanks for that, Megan and Forestry team. I was going to go to Anjanette next. Sounds like Anjanette's got a question, and Jen brought it up earlier. If there's any clarification, Anjanette, please feel free to, or any further on that, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm going to go to Greg, and then after Greg, we'll go to Damon.
I actually applaud the program. I think that we've had this concern around equity, and we're very aware of low income and low canopy neighborhoods around the city. I guess my question would be simply, I'll have to tune in to see the results, but did you start this project in August in terms of rolling it out? Is that why there's an August report date or end date?
If I had more time, I would have gone back and verified the dates that everything kicked in. I believe the financial enforcement ones, it's actually been going on there was a soft pilot rollout while we waited for some other documentation to get into place, where I was providing the lien reductions before all the notices were properly in place and available. But those became live around July 1st in the notices that go out. So the financial assistance started around then. The fee waivers actually started back in Casey, do you have the exact dates? That was, I think, July of 2020, because the COVID pandemic really ramped us up and had us push this out faster so there'd be more relief available.
Yeah, I quickly found the one for enforcement, and that was late September. And then, like Rick said, the application fee waivers that kicked in, probably around July 2020. We ramped up our efforts really quickly as COVID came around and people were struggling with their finances.
Yeah, the reason, I just want to reiterate, the reason why that's a hard answer, Greg, is because we did do a soft rollout. So the start date is really kind of nebulous. So for the pilot, for the evaluation, what we're doing is we're drawing a box around a certain time frame to review, with the understanding that a couple cases were done early, and then cases are going to continue onwards while we evaluate it.
Great, thank you. I just, when you do the report, I think Jen periodically talks about the workload, but having just the number of permits in each category, as well as then how many applied for these applications, and how many maybe were rejected versus accepted. That'd all be very interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're certainly concerned with the financial impact to the Bureau as well.
And I believe we have the capability of reporting on all of that.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Rick. Damon.
Thanks, you guys, for a good job on this. So just to summarize on the permitting side of things, the waivers, if they qualify for the Water Bureau's waiver system, then they can receive waivers on permit fees for, say, removal, not only removal, but for street tree pruning with inspection, street tree planting, plant health care, all those things that are associated with that.
Correct.
Because I know that sometimes those permit fees actually get to be, especially with plant healthcare treatments, those permit fees can be, around the cost of the treatment itself. So
Right, and each one of those application types has the same information available, prompting the reader to know that there's more information available about the fee waivers.
Yeah, just one point to make though, Damon, is the planting applications don't have any fee associated. So that's the one that wouldn't apply.
Great. Thank you. Adrian, gonna bring us all the way around. Oh, actually, Daniel. Adrian, are you available? And then we'll go to Daniel.
Yeah, I am here and
Great.
listen intently. Yeah, very happy to see that this type of program is getting going, and it makes a lot of sense. And it's fairly complicated for even us to understand the nuances of it. And so, I just think that should be kept in mind. The simpler the process could be for applicants. I like that idea of, sort of using the water bill reduction so, other evidence that takes the burden off of the applicant, who is generally going to be, fairly distressed and have difficulty working with the process. It's better.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adrian. Daniel, bring us all around.
Yeah, thanks, Vivek, and thanks Team UFC for putting this together. I'm sure this is not one of the more fun things to do, but it's important. And Jen, maybe you can help me with my memory on this, but there was a case a few years ago that came to UFC's attention, and I'm blanking on whether it was application fee waiver or payment in lieu kind of reduction, but there was a developer who wanted to be treated as low income, and he was developing a lot for sale, which we all know in Portland, you make a lot of money when that happens. And Amanda Fritz stepped in and granted a waiver. I don't know if you remember that case, but it just reminds me, wondering about the subtleties in these changes between development and non-development situations in granting application fee waivers, especially in cases where there is a lot of money to be made in the development, getting waivers where in that case, what we're doing is potentially subsidizing a huge profit for someone wanting to get fee waivers. So anyway, just wondering about potential subtleties there.
I don't see, Jen, did you actually have some context there? Because honestly, that doesn't ring a bell to me, which is surprising to me because that sounds like something I would keep in the back of my head. But the waiver program that we have here is directly to non-development. There's no impact to the development requirements that we have here.
Okay, well, that answers my question.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if there was any distinction between development and non-development situations.
Right, and this is 100% non-development.
Okay, great. That answers my question.
And actually for that, I did put together, just for my own contextualization, about the greater fee waiver program, about who are we currently providing waivers for and what categories are we not. And so, development is not at this point, and it's something for
Okay,
future
that's
consideration.
Simple answer then.
Okay.
Can I just respond
Yeah.
to something you said, Daniel? Up front, you said, you thanked us and said that you said something to the effect of maybe it's not fun doing this work, but I just want to say my team really does enjoy helping customers work through this process and helping them get their fee waivers that they do qualify for. It's a service that people are really happy to find out about, and we're really happy to be able to help low-income applicants to get this. Regulations are sometimes really experienced as burdensome by our applicants and difficult. And this is one way that my team feels like they're able to really partner with the applicants to get their needs met and to receive something back from us as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, my comment was more about this process clearly took a lot of tedious going through code, and that I definitely understand it's not the most fun thing that people do at work is sorting through the vast city of Portland code.
Oh, you just described about 95% of my day, so.
I'm sorry, Rick.
Well, thanks to your hard work. I mean, I can take this question on the chat if you have a moment, but just really quickly, was the meaning of the word pilot in this? Like, is this something that's being tested out for a period of time? Are there evaluations that you're going to do to ensure that it gets codified, or what that really means? And I'm just curious about that and happy to take that by chat. We don't need to spend time because I'm cutting into Brian's time, which I don't want to do.
Okay,
So
I'll respond to it in chat.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. I want to move over, keep our agenda flowing here and get so that we can get to the appeals on time and get you out by 11:25. Brian, I hope I haven't taken too much of your time. And thank you again, Julie, Casey, Rick. Really appreciate your coming in and presenting this work to us. Brian, a little bit about our budget development update, fiscal year 23, it sounds like.
Yes, thanks, Vivek. All right, I'm gonna get my screen sharing going here. All right, so yes, I'm gonna be talking through, this is the time of year that we start developing the budget for the next fiscal year, which would be July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. And so this is obviously something we bring every year to the UFC. One of the UFC's stated roles in code is to advise on the budget development. So this is the first of probably 2 presentations we'll have on this. We'll likely have another one in January, and probably have some of the Bureau's finance staff attending that one. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about budget development. So as you remember, we just went through a pretty significant budget process in the fall, which was really bringing all of the parks levy resources online and getting new positions approved for that. So really the way that the Bureau and Urban Forestry is approaching FY23 is really sort of a hold steady. It's really, we made some really significant changes in the fall that are going to carry through, obviously, into the next fiscal year. So this is largely a budget process of carrying all of those budget changes that happened in the fall through the next fiscal year. So I want to go through a little bit of just an overview of what happened in the fall, what the new resources are, where those went, and then talk a little bit about what that looks like over the next year or so. So first slide is looking at where those parks levy positions went within urban forestry. So some of this will be overview from what was presented a few months ago before this went to City Council, but it is a lot of information, so I thought it'd be helpful just to kind of go over that again. So 30 new positions for urban forestry. We had about 40 prior to that. So really significant staffing increase as a result of the levy. So you can see across our different groups, operations obviously is where our arborists are, the ones doing the tree work. Casey's group, permitting regulation, and then science outreach and planting. So really across the board, pretty significant increases. And then that one position in the city forester group, that's that policy analyst that we've talked about before, who will be leading the urban forest management plan update, as well as some other really critical policy work. So that's where those new staff have gone across the division. And then this is the in terms of the dollar amounts, the budget increase. So again, really significant. I do want to call out in the operations group, about $2 million of that is one time for vehicles, trucks, equipment, things like that. So that does not represent an ongoing increase, more a one time, but still across the board, really significant increases that we're really excited about. And then this is just a breakdown of sort of like, where is that going from a sort of programmatic service delivery standpoint? So one of the changes that really new services that we're able to offer is proactive tree park tree maintenance. As we've said before, we have not had the resources to really do proactive work, and so we've been largely responsive, and that a lot of the funding is going to make that happen. So bringing new arborists on board and all the equipment that comes with that will allow us to do much more park tree maintenance. It would also really bolster the tree emergency response. That is obviously with the kind of weather that we're seeing more intense storms more often, and so we'll have more arborist resources to respond to those as well. Significant resources going to tree planting. This is both park tree planting. We're creating a dedicated park tree planting team. So really increasing the resources we have to do that, and then new staff going to our citywide planting programs as well. Permitting and regulation also getting a significant share, and then Jen mentioned some of the science and community stewardship positions that are actually posted right now as well. And then this is just a breakdown of those 30 positions. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I just thought it'd be helpful to see the types of positions that were created from the levy. Some of these have already been filled. Most of our supervisors, the GIS tech, but we have those botanic specialists posted right now, and there'll be a lot of other positions coming as well. So the reason I share a lot of this is just to give a sense of the onboarding that is going to take, the recruitment, the hiring. This is going to take some time. So that's really, and this is happening with urban forestry. It's happening across the entire bureau. The number of vehicles the bureau is purchasing alone is a pretty monumental task. So that's why we're really treating the FY23 budget year as not really proposing any additional changes, but really trying to focus on bringing online all the new resources that we now have. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. And with these new staff resources that we have, and some of the staff we brought in over the last few years, this is a bit of a history of how much we've been able to spend out of the fund, the number of trees planted, and where we see it going both this year, which is the planting season already underway, and what's projected going forward. So pretty much the story that we've been able to tell over the last few years of increase in expenses, increases in trees planted, and this is really due to the staff that we have now. The planting staff is around 5 now with the levy resource coming online. So what that really does is that puts us into a position to spend more out of the planting fund, which is resulting in more trees planted. But those new positions really give us a sort of foundational capacity to plant more trees as additional funding comes online. And Jen mentioned that federal dollars for urban tree planting is being proposed. She mentioned that in her report last month. We're also seeing, other funding sources that may become available. So while this allows us to spend more out of the planting fund itself, it also puts us in a position to increase planting in other ways. So moving forward, as I mentioned, the 2021-22 fiscal year is really focusing on implementation. Many recruitments are already underway for a lot of these new positions. I say 23 new staff there because that's what was approved in the fall. 7 positions were approved last spring as part of our sort of early use of those funds. We have almost 30 vehicles and pieces of heavy equipment to purchase and bring online. Obviously, a lot of workspace planning. A lot of the vehicles we're buying are like electric vehicles, and so we're getting electric vehicle charging stations installed. So there's obviously just a lot of work in order to hire 30 staff and bring all that online. And then beyond that, it's really when we're starting to focus on what really bringing these new services and programs. So workforce development and diversity, obviously with having 30 new staff, that really presents an opportunity to increase the diversity of our staff. Bringing on a park tree maintenance program. One of the things that we got funding for is a tree asset management database. So that's something that we're working on with the Bureau. Bringing on increases in tree planting, the Title 11 amendments. As Jen mentioned, hiring staff that are really focused on community forest stewardship and building partnerships, education outreach, and then one of the positions that we have in the permitting and regulation group is focusing on building a specific code compliance program. So that's one of the positions that we'll be hiring over the next year or so, is someone to come in and really look at what that program should be. So yeah, that's a real kind of overview of where things are headed. Not a lot of changes for FY23 since, again, we have a lot got approved back in the fall. So that's what we'll be focusing on. And I'll see a few things in the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing and get back to everyone.
All right, let's go do our rectangle polygon thing again, starting maybe backwards with, since Adrienne has her hand up, and then after Adrienne we'll go to Daniel.
Yeah, so incredibly exciting and well thought out work, and just an honor to be involved with urban forestry during this growth period and opportunity to do more. A question that I had, and maybe it relates to your asset database, but in terms of there's trees planted, but there's also trees coming down, right? So to what extent do you track the net? And also, presumably, a lot of losses are not, either permitted or, not under urban forestry jurisdiction. So just tracking the canopy and setting very explicit goals for that, because that actually might mean that resources are targeted slightly differently. Just a question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So that is something that we would track and report on every year. We have it's called the Urban Forest Action Plan update. So it is an annual update to the progress made towards the goals of the Urban Forest Management Plan. And so in that document, we do report on number of trees removed, number of trees planted, and we do break it down from street and private trees, trees removed and planted in development versus non-development. But as you noted, of course, those are just what's permitted. And so we really only know about it if it goes through a permit process. So that obviously does not capture things that are trees that are removed without going through the permit process. And obviously another limitation, which is why we have that staff to design a code compliance program, is that report is, in terms of trees planted, is looking partially at trees that have been permitted to be planted. It does not necessarily mean they were planted, and that's one of the reasons we're building a code compliance program, is because we know a significant number of trees that people are required to plant as a condition of their permit are not planted, and we don't have the capacity to go out there and check. So part of the reason that we are bringing a lot of permitting and regulation staff on board is to start building a program where we can verify that. But yeah, I hope that answers most of your question.
Yeah, I mean, it basically answers it. What about sort of other satellite methods of looking at overall canopy or other means that are accepted in the trade?
Yeah, if I can speak to that too. And Adrian, first I wanted to say thank you. An insightful question, and we could spend a lot of time talking about it. And thanks, Brian, for covering a lot. So two things. We do have a process by which we evaluate canopy cover, not in detail. It's really the extent and the change over time on a regular basis. And we update you folks when we do that. And also about the software system, we don't have a real tree asset management software system. So that's where this really all lies, because having tools like that will intersect canopy cover, locations, tree species, permit activity, maintenance activity is what it all comes down to. If you draw that analogy that I find myself increasingly doing, we have a sewer system in the city, and the folks who manage it, your environmental services, they know where every pipe is, they know what it's made of, they know how big it is, they know how old it is, they know when work's been done on it and any permits issued on it. We need the same thing in forestry, and that's what this will give us. So we could have loads more information coming from those data once we have it. It will take a few years to get. We've been working on it since, let's see, 2012. So thanks to the levy, maybe it'll go quicker now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. Daniel?
Thanks. Adrian, I just want to say, if you want that information, Vivek had a great slide in his talk this week showing trees increase in canopy and decrease in canopy and net increase or decrease by neighborhood in his talk. So that's pretty interesting information. I agree. So I don't have a question, but I do want to say, I know Jen, you and your staff have a lot on your plate that's about to come on your plate. I've been working for an organization years ago with rapid growth, and understand that it's probably going to feel like everybody's learning their new jobs for a while. So I don't know if there's anything we can do to help, but I do want to recognize that's a piece of work that doesn't often get noticed.
Agreed, and important. Maybe Daniel, I'll catch up with you and invite you to a massed coffee or beverage of your choice, and I can get your thoughts on what you've seen work.
All right. Next, I think we're, if I can remember right, we're going to Damon, and then we're going to Greg, if I have my order correct.
I don't really have any comments.
Okay, thanks, Damon. Greg, any responses, comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I'm particularly excited about both the code compliance aspect of this and the asset management. I would hope, and I know you've probably got a really comprehensive list of things you would want to have in it, but I just sort of mentioned it'd be nice not only to have the heritage trees, but maybe the private heritage trees. I realize that's kind of a stretch, but it is something that urban forestry does manage. So maybe a stretch to a few of those private trees. And then I guess the last thing is I'm wondering about, and maybe this is just an offline discussion, but the longer term impacts of COVID in terms of you've got a bunch of new people coming in. Folks that I work with on heritage trees are often working at home. So I'm wondering how the space is going to expand or shrink over the years, what we've learned about how people that don't have to be in the field work. And, you know, for at least the early year or two, people weren't sharing vehicles. So I'm wondering if that is a thing of the past and if those vehicles are making up for people having to go out singly, or just kind of that nuts and bolts aspect of having enough people and enough stuff.
Yeah, short version, Greg, is that our bureau, as well as the whole city, are dealing with those very current realities, COVID and the implications for the work environment, as I think almost every organization is across the country, across the world. And so a lot of planning and thought is going into it. There are protocols and policies being developed around it. Our goal in forestry is to do whatever is most efficient and effective to get our work done, and also best supports our team, because of course, there's a lot of strain on everyone these days. So we want to try to do everything we can to make it easy. In terms of vehicles, our vehicle needs aren't really changed by COVID. Rather, they remain largely as we designed them pre-COVID, really to what's needed to do the work and the type of work that we need to do. I wanted to mention this too, I forgot it in the first part. Our bureau has staff whose role it is to do space and workplace planning. And so we're part of that, figuring all that out. I hope that helps.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I think we're going to, if I have it right, I think it's Megan. No, Anjanette and then Megan. Right. Anjanette, any comments about the budget? Pass. Okay, thanks. Megan.
My quick question was, what is the current balance in the tree preservation fund? I think I'm missing a letter or a word as part of that, but just so I can have that comparison.
Yeah, the balance is about, I want to say about $4.8 million right now. And we have definitely seen revenue decline as a result of COVID. Development activity in the city is about half what it was. And we know that most of the money coming into that fund is mitigation for trees removed there. Our projections have us basically reducing that fund balance over the next 5 years down to about $2 million. So as we're ramping up, we're going to be spending quite a bit more than is coming in. And so that's part of the challenges of managing a fund that doesn't have a set amount of revenue come in every year. We kind of have to figure out what's a sustainable amount. But yeah, it's about 4.8 million right now.
Thanks, Brian. And the only thing I know that both you, Brian, and you, Jen, have heard me make this comment before around the budget. And as you pointed out, it is very similar to kind of the previous budget that we reviewed. But I know that this is a really staff position heavy increase. And I'm always going to continue to point out wanting to see increase in funding for community partners that are helping do this work. It's really increasing internal capacity, and I really want to just continue across parks in general. This is not just an urban forestry comment, and I've made that on the budget advisory committee, but really seeing increased for the important work that all of these community partners are doing externally as well. Yep.
I'm really glad you said that, actually, and I should have mentioned this. That is part of the Director Long's budget guidance is to see the Bureau increase grants to community partners and other sort of partnerships. That's part of her budget guidance for additional funding requests this year. And I think as part of the Bureau's budget update we'll have next month, we're going to hear more about that. So that has definitely been heard, and we're seeing that across parks. So thanks.
All right, let's go to Bruce and then Barbara.
I wanted to, it's kind of agree with Megan. It's really important that the community outreach positions are filled with people who are familiar with the community and who can work with the community. I don't know if any guidelines are in place or if it's even legal to have guidelines in place that there would be extra points given to applicants who are from those communities or have experience with them. The challenge of bringing in people who are not familiar with the communities, there's quite a bit of ramp up time, learning time, and sometimes it never happens. So I wish there was, perhaps giving the grants to community organizations is a way to do a better job at that, but I'm hoping in the hiring that will be a consideration. I also, in the fund allocation, there's really not that much money that's going to street tree planting, and that will need to change in the future. It's figuring out how to do that. But most of the tree planting is happening in parks or capital improvement projects. And I just, there needs to be more done. I know it's a funding issue, but I just think that's a higher priority.
Thanks, Bruce. A couple quick bits of information in response for you. Indeed, focusing on diverse applicant pools and hiring folks who better reflect the public that we all in the city serve is a goal, and there are structures and intention in place for that. I will acknowledge that the field of urban forestry and other forestry are traditionally a white and male dominated field, and that continues to be a challenge that we'll all be navigating for some time. We also have workforce development programs in place to help with that. And then regarding tree planting, actually, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of the tree planting that we do now, or at least a significant proportion of it, is in fact street trees. So, and we have the update that we do online. Actually, maybe we'll do that. We'll share that link, and that is increasing over time as well.
Yeah, most of the fund that's coming out of the tree planting and preservation fund is going to contractors to do street tree planting. I think we're aiming for around 700, 750 this year, and then about 1,200 next year. So.
Okay, thank you. Barbara.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for that and for that presentation, Brian, and also that I'm hoping that with those positions and the compliance stuff that's done, that we can take a close look at some of these trees that we are denying removal in appeals, because I've often wondered what happens when the appeal hearing closes.
That's a good question. Yes.
Yeah, I suspect that it's not all good. And, you know, I know that you haven't had the staff to do everything. I mean, you know, that's real clear. But anyway, yeah, I think it's something that's necessary.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brian, Jen, and team for all this information. Super helpful in deliberating. Brian, if I got this right, if I got your graph, just real quick on that graph that you had going with expenses to trees, if I looked at it as about $1 million for 3,000 trees, is that right? If I'm kind of tracking that, that comes down to, if I'm doing this right, $333 per tree.
Yeah, I think yes. I think you're reading that right. And so our cost per tree really varies based on the type of planting. So for the yard tree giveaway, the cost is very low. When we're using contractors for street trees, there's 3 years of watering and establishment included, so the cost is higher. But yeah, I guess on average.
Is it fair to say it's an average number, 333 per tree?
Yeah,
that a nice ring to it.
And we do want to clarify that that is just spending out of the tree planting fund. So we have staff that support tree planting whose costs are not included in that because they're paid for out of the general fund or other sort of sources. So we do try to keep as much of the planting fund going towards direct tree planting through the contractors mainly.
Okay. Great. Thanks for that clarification. Good. So, I mean, it would be, so just actually one more quick follow-up. It'd be really hard to do a comparison of the amount of, it sounds like it'd be really hard to do a comparison of the amount of resources it takes urban forestry to plant a tree compared to another entity, because the costs are kind of coming from separate pools. Is that right?
I think I'm not understanding your question, Vivek.
Just wondering about how do we compare, for example, a community-based organization
Oh, I see.
planting a tree versus urban forestry planting a tree? I think that's been a conversation we've had, and I think we need to, I'm just curious if there's any way to quantify that.
Yeah, I think at a pretty broad course level, you can kind of do the sort of analysis that you're talking about there. I think I know that we've heard from other cities that our costs are pretty comparable. Like we have staff who've come from San Francisco, and our cost per tree is lower than what they have there. So, but I think in terms of other types of planting, I haven't really done an analysis like that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And
Looks
I
like
see Jen.
Yeah, Jen's hand.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something about an additional information for Bruce, but I'll add on to Vivek's too. Bruce, I think you mentioned CIPs, capital improvement projects for planting. Please know that those are city development projects. So new stretch of street or a park or something like that. Those are paid for by the projects. So they're not out of the tree planting or preservation fund or forestry's budget. And then Vivek, one of the challenges in comparing programs wherever they're housed in different organizations, of course, is having the information and the reliability of the information that's provided. And as Brian said, we haven't explored any of that. We've looked at what other cities' costs are. And when we do our program evaluation, especially when we're piloting things like different types of tree planting programs, our practice is to look at what other cities are doing. And that includes looking at what their cost and outcome experiences have been.
Okay, we're gonna all be done here. I just a quick note as we close out. I put a little note in our for the hosts and panelists. I created a little survey on menti.com. I'm trying to gather a little bit of info as a 2021 reflection to see kind of where we are. I've heard a bunch of comments today. I've included some other comments from previous meetings that we've had throughout the year. Just 8 little agree, disagree responses. That's really trying to make this as brief and as easy for you as possible, just to gather a little bit of info of how things are going, just to check the pulse on things. It's anonymous, so you can just go in and drop. For me, it's just really to be able to bring this back to Brian and Jen and kind of help navigate into 2022. So I'll try to do these more frequently in 2022. If it's interesting to you, and we can bring the information back and help us guide process of these meetings. So if you just take a minute to do that, that would be lovely.
Vivek, for those of us that are going to be on the appeal and might not have time at the moment, can you, can you?
It's open for, I think, like 36 hours. So that's what they give me for this little menti.com free subscription. So yeah, if you would, anytime the next 24 or 36 hours would be great.
Can you email?
Vivek, I want to make sure Greg's comment in the chat doesn't get lost.
Oh, right. Thank you. I'll bring that up right now. Just wanted to document requests for private heritage trees to be considered in tree asset management program. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
So we have an appeal in 2 minutes.
Yep. Thank you. Sorry to cut this off real quick, but nice seeing you all. Let's look forward to hearing back from you on this poll, and we'll see you next year, if not sooner. Happy New Year. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Vivek. Thanks everyone.
New Year.
Early.
Let everyone kind of get settled here. So I do not see the appellant on yet. So
I see. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Don't think I see them here. I would say I want to give everyone a chance to take a break, just because we've been here for 2 hours already. So maybe just take a few minutes. Let's come back at like 11:32. If I just need to step away for a minute, and I'll see if the appellant comes on.
Great. Brian, I updated my Zoom, and it's not quite as it's not the same. So sometimes I can't find stuff now.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
So just know that it's a little bit, I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Anyway,
No worries. We will see how to get through it.
So maybe you could let us all know when the appellant comes on. It should be the appellant and his attorney.
Yeah, I believe they indicated their attorney would be joining them as well,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize until this morning when I saw that. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna give the opponent a phone call since they're not here yet. I'm gonna hop off for a second here.
Damon, are you thinking about warmer places in Spain?
Oh, it was a little warmer back then, but yeah, it's now I'm definitely stuck in the cold here. I do have to say that Malaga is lovely in this time of year, as is Barcelona. So we had a good time.
What's the procedure if the appellant doesn't show up? Is it just put off?
I don't think it is. I'm actually looking at the code right now. We've never had an appellant that didn't show up in 8 years. Because I've been chair for 8 years, we've never had an appellant that didn't show up.
All right, I called, I didn't get an answer, but I think I see them on Zoom now, so I'm gonna move them into the meeting.
Okay. Let me know when that happens, if you would, please, because they're not on my screen.
Yeah, here we go. Hey. All right, Mr. Bailey, can you hear us? Or I'm not able to hear. Is everyone?
No, we're not hearing him.
Maybe a Bluetooth issue, Mr. Bailey?
We can definitely wait a few minutes to get that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, Mr. Bailey, is your attorney on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you now.
So Brian, maybe you could tell me who came on.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see anyone else that's joined this.
So Mr. Bailey, is your attorney going to join you?
Oh, I think he's off now.